My name is Brittany Glover. I attend Northview High School and I'm 18 years old. I plan on getting my multimedia degree at Troy University because I love cameras and I love photography and I love just the whole media side of journalism. I'm really excited to interview Miss Rosalind James today. I'm excited to learn about her experiences growing up and who she is and her accomplishments and everything that she's experience through life, basically.
I am Rosalind James, retired from the Alabama Cooperative Extension System, and a native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and I now reside in Dothan, Alabama.
So your father was a civil rights photographer, correct?
Yes, well, he took pictures for the civil rights movement. My father started with photography as a hobby when he was very young, and someone suggested to him that this would be a good way to, make a living. And so then he started taking pictures of family events, and then people started calling him to come and take pictures of events in the community. And then by him being one of the first African American photographers during that time, he got an invitation to take pictures of weddings. During that time, the schools were segregated, so he took pictures at the black high schools and of graduations and proms and everything. So his skills and talent just became known throughout the community. And so he was friends with Reverend T.Y. Rogers, who was a civil rights activist there in Tuscaloosa. And one of the things, he invited him to come one day to First African Baptist Church in Tuscaloosa. That's where a lot of the mass meetings were held and town hall meetings and everything. And this was the day, I have a news article here that my father took, that Dr. King, he would often visit Tuscaloosa. And he was giving an inaugural speech for T.Y. Rogers because he was going to be the pastor of the church that day. And this is the article that my father was there and he took the picture. And so what he really did, he took pictures and he just captured history, the movement, and he did such a good job. He set up a photography studio right there in the home.
Really?
Yes, and a lot of times they ask him to take pictures to help to give documentation to attorneys when African Americans were not treated fairly during that time. So a lot of the pictures that he took, were documentary pictures.
Do you remember any struggles that you or he may have faced being the only African American photographer?
One particular incident that happened one night, he came home and he had tears in his eyes and he was, talking to my mom in the den. And so, I was about 10 years of age and I walked downstairs to hear what was going on. And he was a park ranger. That was his full-time job. Photography was like his part-time job. And he was a park ranger, and so his responsibility was to go to make sure that people were safe on the beach in Tuscaloosa at the Black Warrior River. Back then, the law was you could not drink alcohol or anything on the beach. So he was kind of like a security person, and he would come home so many times just wet from jumping in the river trying to save people's children whose parents weren't paying attention to their children on the beach. But this particular night, he was very upset because they called him and told him there was an explosion at the beach. And so he didn't understand what was going on because he always checked the trash cans, checked everything, and made sure everything was in order every night before he left. So when he went out there, he found a trash can that had been exploded. And what happened, two white men that he had told maybe early in that week that they had to leave because they were drinking alcohol or they were unruly on the beach. So he made them leave, and they got really angry at him. And they had set a bomb for my father. But what happened, when my dad checked the trash can, the bomb did not go off. But when they went back and they found out that, the bomb did not go off, they opened the top, and for some reason the bomb exploded. And I remember that picture today. My dad had to take that picture of them, and the chest and everything was just blown out.
Really?
Yeah, and I can just see that picture so vivid in my mind right now. And I just remember my daddy standing there, with tears in his eyes, because I could have lost my father that day.
Yeah, you could.
And but that was really, really an experience right there. And even with this particular picture, T.Y. Rogers led a march once he was installed as the pastor of First African Baptist Church in Tuscaloosa. He led a march because they had just built a new courthouse in Tuscaloosa, and they had all of these no white signs up around, in the bathrooms and things like that. And so T.Y. Rogers led a march from the church to the courthouse. And a lot of people, violence came out. People always talk about Selma and the Bloody Sunday there. Well, we had a Bloody Tuesday in Tuscaloosa, and people were beaten and arrested, and over 50 people were killed. Were hospitalized. And one of the pictures that I remember my father taking, he went to Druid City Hospital, and there was a picture of a lady in the hospital bed, and one of the tear gas had exploded in front of her face. And her face was like this big, And I just remember, you could barely see the features. She was still alive, but my father was there to take that picture to turn over to the attorneys. And on this particular day, speaking of another picture, they had just left our house. My dad had them all geared up. We were all excited. I remember them walking down our driveway, and we lived near a railroad track. And so they left. There was about 20 or 30 of them, and they were all excited. And I used to remember, I wanted to go so bad, but I was just too young. And they were crossing the railroad track, and the train was passing, and there was a white man that was hanging on the back of the train, and he yelled out, "Hey, niggas," the N-word, and he lost his balance, and he fell, and the train ran right over him and cut him right here and right below on his leg. And I see that picture because my dad took that picture, because the marchers ran back to the house and told us what had happened. And because that picture, I believe, went in Jet magazine. But I can just see, I see that face and the train marks just right here and right there, And so, it was a lot to see all of that, as a little girl and everything. But my father, he stayed, he stayed committed to the movements and everything. And I never saw any fear in my father. But so my dad was just having a good time talking with this white man over the radio. And then all of a sudden I could remember hearing my daddy's voice raised, like he was really angry. And so I remember going out in the den where he had his radio all set up and everything. And they were, these other white men were trying to, when they key in when someone is talking, then you key in to keep somebody else from talking. So they were keying in, they were fussing, they were calling my dad all kinds of names. Then they started threatening him and everything. And this just went on for a while. So I went back in the kitchen with my mom, and then all of a sudden my dad ran into the kitchen, turned all the lights off. I remember we had 5 shotguns, and my daddy handed all of my older siblings a shotgun and told everybody to be quiet. I mean, I could see terror on my dad's face. And I remember looking out of the window. It was black dark. It was real late at night. And I saw 4 carloads of white men pull up in front of our house. And so I just remember staring there. It was a still, quiet night. But for some reason, I wasn't afraid of dying. The only thing that I could think of in my mind was that I wasn't going to see my mother tomorrow. That's just what I kept thinking. I'm not going to ever see my mother again. And it looked like they stood outside there forever. My mother was a quiet, strong, but she is, because they're still living. And she was very strong, and she loved us, she protected us, and she was a woman of a lot of courage. And she was indeed the wind beneath my father's wings. She was always right there to support my dad. And I remember, you know, just looking out of the window, and I didn't think they were ever going to leave. And then finally they drove off. And so I said, wow, you know. And then the next morning I heard this noise, and my dad walked outside the kitchen, and the white men that had talked to my father over the radio, they had beaten him up, broke both of his hands, and threw him at the porch. And my dad had to take him to the hospital. Never saw any fear in my father. And one thing, in spite of all, you know, that he went through and our family went through, because there was a riot downtown in Tuscaloosa, and they were throwing rocks at our car. And we had to lay down in the car, you know, in order, you know, to get home and everything. But in spite of everything that, you know, my dad experienced and all, he never taught us to hate anyone. But he always told us to stand up for ourselves and to get a good education and to be the best that we could be, you know. And as of today, I tell you, someone told me, you don't fear anybody, do you? You know, I speak my mind. I try to be, be myself, and I try to help people. And I love to motivate young people, because that's what my father, he was a Boy Scout master, so he always tried to motivate and love young people, and they were always coming to his house all the time. And they still come today.
Really?
Yes, they still come and visit him today. And so I've tried to live that legacy that my father, you know, did. And he just had just excellent work ethics. You know, if there was something that he was supposed to do, he did it, and he did it on time. He was very professional. He, just was a good, caring, honest person and everything. And sometimes he have a little temper. I think over the years, you know, he saw so much, and he was mistreated a lot on his job because he was a very smart man. And you know, a lot of times, you know, the frustration of that, you know, just being a Black man during that time, and even today, you know, they were very much mistreated and everything. But he continued to stay there and take care of his family. And he became the first Black, I think it was research ranger. And he was interviewed from, let's see, what was the name of that magazine? I can't think of it right now, but it was a National Geographic. That's what it was.
On that?
Yes,
Wow.
yes. They interviewed him, and my mom showed them in the dark room taking pictures and developing the pictures, and he became the first Black resource ranger.
Wow.
Yeah. What I think is good for young people to know about history, and to know about what people in their community have been through and how they overcame it, you know, and how they overcame things in a positive way. And I think it's good for young people to know that, because if it wasn't for these past experiences that we've been through, I think it has helped to make young people, a better person. Young people need to know their history and need to know their history, and hopefully it will help them to uh, have a better future and to appreciate, their lives today and to become better adults.
My name is Edward Vaughn, and I am a native of Dothan, Alabama, but I was born in Abbeville, Alabama, which is about 30 miles north of Dothan. And I moved after I graduated from high school in Dothan, Carver High School, Dothan, 1951. I went to college a little after I was expelled from high school. I went to college for leading a strike. I went to college at Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, where I stayed there for 4 years. We had a very exciting time there and at Fisk University, and we led the early civil rights achievements in the city of Nashville. And we integrated the L&N Railroad under my leadership for 3 years as NAACP president, college president. When I left Fisk University, I went to law school at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. Stayed there a year, it was kind of taxing, and from there I moved to Detroit, got married, and in Detroit worked at several different jobs, ended up being elected to the Michigan House of Representatives after I served 10 years as the executive assistant to the first African-American mayor of Detroit, the Honorable Coleman A. Young. I worked for him for 10 years. After that, I served 4 terms in the Michigan House of Representatives from where I retired. And so I came back home to take care of my mom, and my mom has passed. She lived to be 100, and I'm in Dothan now, and I'm nearing 100. So anyway, that's me, Edward Vaughn. I've always been in leadership, and I've always been somehow in business, an entrepreneur, because all my relatives were entrepreneurs. My grandfather, my great uncle, they all were businessmen in Abbeville. And they said they went in business because they wanted to hire their own children, their own daughters especially, to keep them from being molested by whites in Abbeville. Because Abbeville, Henry County, was a hellhole at that time. And to this day, it's not what it used to be, but it's better. And of course, my cousin, Miss Dorothy Baker, is on the Abbeville City Council, and she's a fighter, just like all of the members of my family have been fighters in one way or another.
Was it hard for you to defeat the odds, or being that you already had examples of being successful in African American community, was it just something that you were determined to do, or was it still hard being here in County?
For some reason, and I'm not so sure, it may have been because my grandfather, Frank White, who was a mulatto, his dad was a slave owner up in Barber County. And of course, because he looked like a white man, he worked uptown, Frank White, he worked uptown in Abbeville. And he used to hear about the whites who were going to go out. Henry County has had a terrible reputation for violence against blacks, and as evidenced by what has been done by Brian Stevenson in Montgomery in that situation. And Risa Taylor, the lady who was raped, all that happened in my hometown of Abbeville. And so it has always been a place like that. So my grandfather, Frank White, he spent his entire life finding out, because he was uptown with the whites, finding out what they were up to. And when he would find out that they were going to go out and lynch a black person, he would then get in his car, he always had a car, and he would drive out to their house and pick them up and bring them to Dothan. And they had a safe house in Dothan, run by Mr. E.B. Smart on South Foster Street. They would put them in the safe house, and they would wait until around 11 o'clock when the 58 ran. And the 58 was a train going north. And a lot of black folks got out of here on the 58. It would go from Dothan to Savannah to Washington, D.C. and up the coast. And when my grandfather would put them on the train and save them, they would get to New York, and my uncles and aunts, full of uncles and aunts in New York, they would find them jobs. So we had a network going that my grandfather was part of. He had to get his own children out. My Uncle J.B. was kicked uptown when he was shining shoes. A white boy kicked him, and while Uncle JB was bent over on his shoe shine stand checking his polish and stuff, this white boy kicked him, and so Uncle JB got a Coca-Cola bottle. And I don't know if you old enough to remember the real Coca-Cola bottles, but they were pretty thick. And he got in, and his name was Coley. That was the white kid's name. And so Uncle JB cold conked him in the back of his head with the Coca-Cola bottle. And so Granddaddy gave him a gun when he ran home, and Granddaddy gave him a gun and said, "Now, anybody try to stop you," he said, "don't ask no question, don't answer no question, just start shooting." And so, so Uncle JB said, "I'll meet you at Skipper Creek." And Skipper Creek was in back of the 40-some acres that my grandfather owned. He'd meet him at Skipper Creek, put him in his car, drive him to Dothan, put him in the safe house. So he had to get 2 or 3 of his own kids to New York the same way. So anyway, so I have quite a heritage of fighters. And I can name more of them. He wasn't the only one, but he was the most famous one. And he said he had one that he didn't save, and the guy believed his boss loved him, so he owed the boss some money. And he said, he ain't gonna bother me. He know I'm gonna pay him back. And he said, no, he said he was coming to kill you tonight. He was bringing a crowd out to kill you. And so the black guy said, he's not gonna bother me. And so anyway, Granddaddy Frank said that they came that night and they killed him because he wouldn't go with Granddaddy. Granddaddy tried to get him to go, but he wouldn't go. But anyway, that's the kind of family I come from. So they've been fighters. And you know, a lot of these things growing up, I didn't really know until later on. And my mom began to tell me the stories.
We're good. All right, you were friends with Charles Wright, which led you.
Yeah, Dr. Wright.
Which led you to meeting Aretha Franklin, and then also having an interaction here in Dothan with George Washington Carver. How hard was it for you to get to that place after being betrayed back in Detroit?
You mean like Dr. Charles Wright, who was the owner of was the founder of the largest museum of African American history in the world, which was the Wright Museum in Detroit, Michigan. Until the Smithsonian, it was the largest in the world, the Wright Museum. But Dr. Charles Wright was from Dothan, Alabama, born and raised on Pine Street, and went to Alabama State University. And from Alabama State University, he went to Meharry Medical College in Nashville, across the street from where I went to college at Fisk University. Dr. Charles Wright was a gynecologist in Detroit. My sister was one of his patients, and we were friends, but he was very interested in Black history. And he brought 200 or 300 Africans from the African continent to study medicine in America. And he made sure that they went back to Africa to practice medicine. He was a wonderful man. And everybody in Detroit knew Dr. Wright, but he had a little museum. When Mayor Young became mayor of Detroit, the first African-American mayor, and I told you I worked for him for 10 years, the mayor put me in charge of helping Dr. Wright build this museum from the mayor's office, because a lot of the money for the museum came through Coleman Young at the mayor's office. So I was very much involved with Dr. Wright. But he was from Dothan, Alabama. And he always told me, he said, "Ed Vaughn," he said, "I'll tell you what," because his dad was his dad was Reverend Wright, who had a laundromat on Range Street, Range and Newton, had a laundromat in that little shopping plaza there. He told me, he said, Dr. Wright told me, he said, "Ed," he said, "if they ever pave Pine Street," he said, I'll come back to Dothan." Now, you know, when I was growing up in Dothan, in the 40s and the 50s, there were no streets in Dothan that Black people lived on that were paved. Not one. There was no paved street that Black people lived on in Dothan. And you know, when they decided many years later to pave these streets, I lived on the only paved street, and that was Newton Street. And it wasn't paved all the way. And the only reason they paved Newton Street was because of the Dothan Oil Mill Company that produced Domco cooking oil. So the big peanut trucks and cottonseed trucks would get into the oil mill. So I lived on Newton Street, a paved street. All my buddies, they lived on dirt roads. So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. But he told me he'd come back to Dothan. But he did come back to Dothan. He spoke at one of the North Island reunions, because he graduated from North Island School here in Dothan. And but anyway, he built that museum. He's deceased now. And his wife, Dr. Wright, she just passed not too long ago. She came to Dothan. She wrote a book called The Wright Man, the W-R-I-G-H-T man. But that museum is a fabulous museum. It's still very actively involved. I've spoken to them several times. And I have archives there also at the Wright Museum in Detroit.
And through him, you met Aretha Franklin.
Oh, Riri, yeah. Aretha's daddy, Reverend C.L. Franklin, and I were very close friends. He helped finance all of my campaigns. Remember, I couldn't get no money from the powers to be, but Reverend C.L. was my man. So I got to know Aretha through him. I knew her son much better, Edward. We had the same name. Ed and I met, and then through Edward, and I'm Edward, so I met with him at her home for events and this kind of thing. That's how I got to know Aretha. But her dad, Reverend C.L. Franklin, and I were very close. Let me tell you another very interesting thing about that, Reverend C.L. Franklin and Dr. Martin Luther King. Reverend C.L. Franklin was the pastor of New Bethel Baptist Church in Detroit. He was a well-known preacher. I mean, outside of Aretha, Reverend C.L. Franklin was known all over the country because he had a sermon called "The Eagle Stirreth His Nest," and he was a Baptist preacher, and he was a hell of a preacher now. And so Reverend Franklin liked me because of my rebellious nature, because he had a rebellious nature like I had. I guess that was why. But we became very close friends. I would go to his church. He'd see me come in, and he knew I was coming to try to get some help for my political campaign, because I wasn't a member of that church at all. And he would pause in the church meetings. This is honest God truth, and come over and help me on my campaign. That's the kind of guy he was. And his son Cecil would come up and buy books from my bookstore at all times, because I had Vaughn's bookstore, which is a black bookstore in Detroit. Well, 1 week before the March on Washington, now here's how a Dothan guy had a lot to do with the big March on Washington, back in, what was that, the 60s or something? Forgot what year it was, 70s or 80s, I can't remember, I'm lost. Anyway, we decided in Detroit that we were going to have a march on Detroit. And we started planning this big march on Detroit about a week before the March on Washington, maybe 2 weeks before. And so we were going up against all of the top people in Detroit. We went up against Walter Reuther, who was head of the United Automobile Workers. I mean, you can't go up against nobody more powerful than the UAW in Detroit. So all of the black leaders in Detroit, they were against us. All of the white people were against us. The United Automobile Workers was against us. And we said, how are we going to have a march? And nobody is coming around. The people were interested in having a march, a civil rights march in Detroit. And so we came up, myself, Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr., and Reverend State Representative James Del Rio. So we were butting our heads together trying to figure out how could we have a march in Detroit, and the entire power structure was against the march. So we said, the only way we're going to have a march here is to bring Dr. King to Detroit. So that'll change everything. The only way we could get Dr. Martin Luther King to Detroit, and we knew that, was that we had to get Reverend Franklin, because he and Dr. King were very close friends. They were very close friends. And he helped finance a lot of the work that Dr. King did, Reverend C.L. Franklin, Aretha Franklin's father. And so we met with Reverend Franklin, and Reverend Franklin agreed. Reverend Franklin called Dr. King. Dr. King said, when you want me there. And that was a week before the March on Washington. Our march was bigger than the March on Washington. And he gave the I Have a Dream speech right there at Cobo Hall in Detroit, Michigan. I'm standing right there in front of him, listening to him give that I Have a Dream speech. And that next week, a week or two later, he gave it in Washington at the March on Washington. But that was the connection to the March on Washington, to Reverend C.L. Franklin, to Aretha Franklin's father.
All right. You housed George Washington Carver here in Dothan at one point?
Well, I of course, I wasn't here. In 1938, I was, 4 years old. But Dr. George Washington Carver came to Detroit in 1938 to be the first speaker at the first Peanut Festival. And it was at Wiregrass Stadium, which is now where Wiregrass Park is over on 6th Avenue. But that was a stadium there. Some tennis courts over there now, but that used to be Wiregrass Stadium. I used to go there and watch black baseball games, and I played football in high school, so we played our football games there because we didn't have anywhere at Carver to play except at the stadium. So anyway, Dr. Carver came to Dothan in 1938, and because he was black, he could not stay in any hotels here in Dothan. There were hotels, the Houston Hotel, which is where WTVY is now, and then the Martin Hotel, which was on Main Street, because none of those hotels were, and there were no other hotels to speak of around, but no white hotels was allowed him to stay. So he stayed in the home of Miss Gussie McMillan, who was my first grade 2 teacher. The lady he taught me not to ever hit a woman, remember her? My first grade school teacher. Anyway, he stayed in her home. And when I retired from the Michigan State Legislature and came back home, I bought her home, which is 702 East Newton Street. And that's where Dr. Carver stayed in 1938 when he came here to speak at the first Peanut Festival. Miss McMillan was a graduate of Tuskegee University, and it was Tuskegee Institute at that time. And so I bought that and turned it into my museum of African American history. So it's still in Dothan, and of course, Michael hit us pretty hard. Michael the storm hit us pretty hard. So anyway, but I got a bunch of stuff there. I got some really interesting things there. But that's where Dr. Carver stayed when he came to Dothan in 1938.
What else are you doing to make sure that our generation knows the importance of learning their history?
Well, I've organized classes here in Dothan. I've taught African American history here. I organized a drill team. That was one of the ways that I was able to get sub-teams really interested in Black history, was to organize drill teams. And I'm trying to organize another drill team now in Ford Country, because there's a lot of problems over there in that particular area. And there's a whole history of Ford Country that most people don't really know about, but that's where my church is located. And I'm trying to start a drill team over there and then teach history. I've taught African American history at my church, and I would like to do that again. I'm not teaching at the present time, but I would like to do that again and organize a drill team. And I've talked to Mike Schmidt about doing something in the city schools. He and I are friends, so he said that we were going to do something. In fact, I had a meeting with him the other day. We talked about, he was telling me about they were doing pretty well with black girls in Dothan City Schools. I said, what about the black boys? He said, well, they had some things that they were going to do. So I'm going to be right up on that with Mike, president of the school board. And I've met the superintendent, but I haven't really talked with her. But I think that, back to what we said early on, is if these black children have no knowledge of themselves, know nothing about themselves, know nothing about why they are like they are, why they look like they look, and white kids too. I mean, they need to know something about themselves, because they don't know either. And we all need to know something about American history, because we don't know either. I mean, I doubt if 20 folks in Dothan know anything about the Reconstruction, which is Gates up at Harvard University. He did a thing on the Reconstruction on PBS. But you know, he didn't really tell the whole story. I know the story very well on Reconstruction. And that was a very critical time in American history. You know, you're talking about the thing that gave us the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. You're talking about something that's very, very important in America. Most Americans don't have a clue, black or white. They don't know anything about that or what happened. Because the Republicans were, under President Abraham Lincoln, won the Civil War against the South and defeated them. When we started out to rebuild, there was an effort in Reconstruction to let the slave owners back into a semblance of power. Well, the radical Republicans, the so-called radical Republicans in Washington said, wait a minute, no. But for a while, they were back in power. They said, no, we can't do that. You know, we got to help those folks that we kept in slavery all these years. We got to help them. And so that started the real Reconstruction. And that's when blacks were elected to office. You know, we had state senators, national senators and representatives from all of these southern states during the Reconstruction period. You know, that was in from 1865 to 1875 was the Reconstruction period. We had all these blacks. That's how we got the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. These gun advocates always talking about guns, the Second Amendment. What about the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment? They were set up especially for blacks. The 13th Amendment freed us from slavery. The 14th Amendment made us citizens. And the 15th Amendment gave us the right to vote. 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Freedom from slavery, the right to vote, all of that, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. Very important parts of the United States Constitution. And everybody uses them for their own purposes except us. You know, we don't even have the right to vote in many areas. Voter suppression is all over this country. So my point is that today we could be a better nation if we adhered to the United States Constitution, especially the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment to the Constitution. So I think that's work that has to be done and work that we need to work on. So I'm optimistic. So hope springs eternal, and I'm optimistic. I believe that we can all come together and make America and the world a better place for everyone to live. It's hard, it's difficult, because tribalism is everywhere. You got tribes everywhere, and tribes from the beginning of tribes have always fought each other, and tribes are still fighting each other. Tribes in America fighting each other. Tribes in the North are fighting tribes in the South. Tribes who are poor are fighting tribes who are rich. After the Civil War, one of the greatest organizations that happened in the South was the Sharecroppers Union. Black sharecroppers and white sharecroppers came together. But you know how that happened. And, you know, they kicked the race card in. Then that broke that up. Anyway, lesson's over. I'll teach you some more next time. Anyway, it's been great talking.
Hi, my name is Akila Howard. I'm from Georgia, Thomasville, Georgia, City of Roses.
My name is Debbie Mann, and I live in Tallahassee, Florida. Originally born in New York City, Queens, and did military service. I was proud to serve, and that's about it. So I'm 17, and my mom and dad had to sign for me. And 18 is your legal age to be an adult. I'm the rebellious one in the family. I'm very rebellious. Strong-willed and rebellious. That's what, you know, with the flood, you know, my parents were like, you've been always strong-willed. They were so mad at me, you know, like, you're always strong-willed. You never listen. You were never the one that listened. Because they had 3 daughters. And I said to them, I said, so it's funny, and I've done it as a parent too. You think kids don't listen behind closed doors. You know, you go to another room and you talk a private conversation in an apartment within walls in New York City. And no, the kids don't hear you. Well, yeah, we hear. You know, it's funny. It's like you hear everything, but you know, you act like you don't because that's what you're supposed to do. So my mom and dad were arguing about signing the papers. And I told them, I said, if they didn't sign the papers to let me join the military, that was fine. I was just never going to talk to them again as long as I lived. They were never going to see their grandchildren. At 18, I was going to join without their permission. I didn't need their permission because I was a legal adult. And my mom was like, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't break your mother's heart that way. And I said, yeah, I would. And my dad looked and, yeah, she would. So we're going to talk about it. So they went in the back bedroom. And of course, I could hear everything. And of course, I wasn't very far from the back bedroom intentionally. I positioned myself. And they were arguing about how safe it was. You know, my dad's a World War II veteran. So he was worried about me, and my mom was like, she could get shot. No, they don't put women in the front line. She's not going to go to the front line. And he's like, what war is she going to? Nam is over with. You know, we're not going to have another war. Not a war that she's going to be going into. And he was like, Jean, let's face it. This one is the hardest one. She doesn't listen. She's mule-headed. She's gonna do it, unfortunately. But she doesn't realize how hard the military is. She's gonna cry, she's gonna come back, she's gonna say, I couldn't do it, and you were right. You know, you were right, and I was wrong, and I should have never done it. So let her go. She ain't gonna make I think it was 9-week basic. She's gonna be writing home, wanting us to pick her up. She's gonna quit, she's gonna come back, all this other stuff. She'll be fine. She'll be right back here where she belongs. She'll go to college here, she's fine. And so they signed the paperwork. And when I graduated, and it was hard. It was what he said. It was hard. I hadn't even known how to do a push-up. So it was very hard. And I am from the north, and I went to basic training for Fort McClellan, Alabama.
Okay.
That's as south as you could get now. That's pretty darn south. I do know from basic, it was a good experience. It was a bad experience. That I ended up passing a PT test a lot because of the fact that I was from New York, and every single one of my darn drill sergeants was from the South. And they enjoyed making fun out of the fact that I was from New York, because they would say Private Yankee drop. And back then in 78, 77, 78, you were allowed to curse. You were allowed to be racial. I really did not hear the word nigger until I joined the military. And I heard that word, and it was perfectly acceptable. It was tolerated. There was no problem with that. Just like drinking was tolerated, which is why a lot of older soldiers are alcoholics. My dad never smoked. He went to World War II. He got issued cigarettes and a lighter. He got issued from the U.S. Army. It said U.S. Army on it, a freaking lighter. He got issued a lighter. He got issued cigarette rations. And my dad never smoked until he joined the military in World War II. And then when he came home, he was still smoking. And after a while, my mom said, you're going to have to stop. This is going to get to the kids. You're going to have to stop. But they got him on that. They got him on the cigarettes.
And didn't take responsibility.
No, of course not. And just like the military didn't take responsibility for creating a bunch of alcoholics either.
And they tried, do you think the programs that they have today are helping more soldiers after they leave the Army, or it's just...
I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that, but I also know that, no offense meant, civilians, like I love my husband, and I could talk to him all day long about what I experienced, but it's not the same thing as he being a military person and seeing it.
Okay.
And even when I was a single parent and my kids got older, I tried to talk to Catherine, and she refuses. She just, Mom, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to hear it. I don't think she resents me anymore, but I think there was a time when she did. She was 19 and my son was 17. And the first time I had to go overseas to Afghanistan, I left my daughter in charge of my son. I didn't have a choice. My mom and dad were elderly and really could not take care of the kids, and I did not want them to go back to New York. The Army was like, because I was a National Guard, the Army was, they have a father. And I said, why do you think he's an ex-husband? There's a reason. What, they're gonna live on top of a rooftop in New York City, in New York, upstate New York in the wintertime? Here's a 1-bedroom shack. Really? With a wife. And what, I'm gonna put them on the rooftop? No, that ain't happening either. So Catherine, who wanted to move to Tallahassee at the time, or wanted to leave actually Sneed's little town, said, we don't want to be separated, and we don't want to go live with Dad. Well, this, so what other options are there? And she said, I will stay home and I will take care of Daniel. So you're 19. Yeah, I could do it. So she kind of raised Daniel. I didn't see him graduate high school. The other day, Catherine and I were talking. And I didn't even know till the other day when she was talking about his high school graduation. I didn't even know he was prom king. Because I wasn't there. I didn't even know. That hurt. I know she probably didn't think anything about it. I probably should have. And maybe she told me or he told me when they were younger. I don't remember, but I don't know, it just really hit me when she said that. Because when she said, yeah, he was really popular, especially in his senior year. Well, hell, I wasn't there for his fucking senior year. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was his senior year. I know his father saw him graduate. And I know his father saw him graduate and he left the next day. That's all I know. I wasn't there. I don't know why it really hurt, but it really hurt when she said that the other day.
You do so far throughout this whole interview. I feel like you've done so much, and you still are doing so much for your children. So that hurts because you, like you said, you couldn't be there, but you can't hold that over your head when you were supplying for your family. You were doing everything that you could, because this is after the flood that happened, right? You were doing so much. Doing so much. So for your daughter to take some of your personality and go ahead and take care of her little brother, that says a lot.
She did. She did a good job. I came home early, early than I was supposed to, and they didn't know, and she didn't even recognize me when I came home the first time. And Daniel's walking up, and he's on crutches. Like, what the hell happened? Well, you're not supposed to be home for another month. Why are you home early? God, okay, sorry. I pumped your bubble. I'm home early. I'm back home in the United States. I'm sorry that inconvenienced you. Well, you see, if you came home at the right time, Daniel would have been out of his cast and you wouldn't have known. I said, well, you're going to tell me what happened? Daniel, I got hurt. Well, oh, damn fooling. A little bit more, son. And it was, I can't remember what he even told me, but anyhow, he was fine. But she said, and she had a valid point. What were you going to do? What could you have done? You made sure I had power of attorney, and I did. I made sure before I left that she had full power of attorney, so she could take him to the hospital. She could get him meds. She could do anything as if she was his mom. I made sure. I sent her money home.
So you were doing your duty.
I learned that whole experience kind of helped her in a way, because she never had to balance a checkbook. So she had that for the first time. I sent every bit home. And I came back and she handed me the checkbook, and she couldn't wait to hand me all that crap. She was like, here. And I looked at it and I said, the checkbook was empty. I said, what? What is going on here? And she said, well, you get bank statements. Why do you need a checkbook? I was like, excuse me? You don't need a checkbook. Like, I've been gone for a year. You didn't write in. I paid the bills, Mom. You said I needed to pay the bills. But she said to me, your system makes you write the same information 3 different times. I'm not going to write the same information. I'm not you. I'm not, she said, I'm not OCD like you are. But I pay the bills. Everything got paid. No checks bounced. Your son is okay, minus a few bones that are now healed. Everything is fine. I was like, oh my God, did you pay the taxes when I was gone? Yes, we did the taxes, earned income, you got to dependents. Yeah, I did all that stuff too.
And you were gone for a year?
Yeah, I was gone for a year.
And she was 20 years old doing all this. I bet that has definitely helped her. I say that because I'm 24 and you sound similar to the way my mom run things with her checkbook and how she would ask me to do things. But that has helped me become the better person I am. So I know that's going to help your daughter become a better version of herself, seeing what you didn't even ask her. She stepped up and was just like, Mom, I'll do this for you. So you doing all that for her, and even your son, is definitely going to take your children so far, whether you know it or not. Those are
They are really good kids.
Mhm.
I'm very proud of them. I have regrets being a soldier, in the sense that I wish I was more there for my family than I was. But in a way, it taught them self-reliance. I do think that with me being in the military, they have learned to deal with the knocks of life a little bit better. They're very strong-willed, and they get that more from me than their dad. And they're determined not to quit. And they do see the big picture. The military, it's been good to me overall. It's just there's people that have been bad in it, like every place else, you know. There's good and bad everywhere.
Yeah.
And you just have to balance it all out and weigh it all out and do a lot of praying. But I couldn't do the things I do with Red Cross. I couldn't do the things I do every day of my life if I didn't believe that our God chooses and that I have to accept that. So if I get involved with like a tornado or a hurricane and 26 people die, it's not because humans are necessarily doing it to themselves. It's God's will. I have to believe that. I have to, because if I don't believe that, then I couldn't do the things I do. It would be so overwhelming. And so I do have to believe it's his choice. And it's not for me to figure out. It's not for me to try to reason. It's for me to accept and do the things I can do to help people and just keep on going. That's what it's all about. I have to believe that. I believe that with all my heart, because I've seen too many things. I think little by little we can all make a change. It's not going to happen overnight, and it probably won't happen in my generation. But there needs to be a change. We need to make a change. We need hatred to go away. We need to stop judging a book by its cover, and respect and learn to agree to disagree. If there's one message, learn to agree to disagree. That's the essence of it. If you could learn that, then you don't have war, you don't have genocide, if you could just learn to agree to disagree. I think this exhibit is really important for the future generations to try to understand as much as they can where hatred comes from, and that hatred takes all different forms, and it affects everybody, and it affects every part of civilization. We need to do something to stop it. We need to be able to have rational conversations and talk to each other without it getting out of control. We need to put humanity back in humanity. And I think this exhibit is good. I know some of the things about this exhibit is going to be very disturbing to me, but it's okay because we can't forget. And when I see in the newspaper that the Holocaust wasn't real, and the moon landing wasn't real, and this wasn't real, and fake news, and it just overwhelms me to think, wow, do we not believe in anything anymore? And that's not good. We have to believe, and we have to make logical decisions. And turning your back away from humanity is not a logical decision. And if this exhibit hurts people and it's traumatic, well, I say good, because life's traumatic. Unless you live in a cocoon and you're a single person on an island by yourself, shit happens. I say that to my kids all the time. Shit just happens. But that's okay, because the alternate of shit not happening is death, and that's worse. So it's okay for things to happen, but we have control over what happens. You have control how you treat another person. There's a lot of things we don't have control over in life, but we all have control on how we treat each other, how we treat ourselves, how we talk to ourselves. And we empower each other and ourselves by our words, by our actions, by our thoughts. Captured all their stories. There are just so many stories out there, and so I got it.
My name is Frank Flowers, Sergeant First Class, retired United States Army, 82nd Airborne Division, 3rd Special Forces Group, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Born and raised here in Dothan, Alabama. I'm here to share my experiences with the younger generation and see if we can get some things turned around. So I'm glad to be here.
What motivated you to join the military?
Well, it was a couple of things. Staying out of trouble. My grandmother had foresight. When I went to college and played football for a couple of years, got injured, didn't want to go to school anymore. Everything had to want to push me. Wound up coming back to Dothan. My grandmother saw me. She says, "You're too talented to be here," because she saw, that there was going to be trouble in these streets if I stayed here. So that was motivation. My second motivation was I've always been a go-getter, no matter what. I've always pushed myself to be the best, and I felt it from the day I was born, literally. That you can be good, and it's evident in my family. You go down my family tree, and everybody's good. So I have a standard to uphold in this family. When I have children, I want to push them on, to greater heights. So those are my two motivations. Yeah.
So when you made the decision to go into the military, what did your family think?
Everybody was all in. They were all in. Even though with the rest, I really didn't know what I was getting into when I joined the military. All I knew I was going to join the military. I wound up becoming an infantryman. 11 Bravo, to start the ground pounders, they call us, from Vietnam to World War I to Panama. I've been in 3 conflicts myself, so I was literally on the ground, bullets flying. I can't get into the gory stories, and I don't want to, gross you out, but it gets pretty crazy in a government sanctioned environment where, it's either them or us. It's fight or flight. And you may feel that at some point in your life, you may not. But you'll deal with it if you do, because you're human, and we figure things out pretty quick, as humans. So.
All right. So what was your upbringing like?
It wasn't the all-American family, per se. My father was a Vietnam veteran, too, so just his aura and his power and, it was complete control in my house, He was like the Great Santini. If you ever see the movie Great Santini, he was that guy. He was, get up at 3 o'clock, let's go rake grass or watch walls or go pick fruit in the backyard. It was always him he wanted to push us because he knew his kids could be pushed also. And I came from that same tree, so. But he drank a lot. And it was for a number of reasons. I'm gonna be honest with you on camera here. Partly because my mother died in a car accident when I was really young. I was in that car. Me, my sister, my brother, there were 3 of us. She was coming from Tuscaloosa back here to Dothan to bring us here. Car flip, she died. We all survived. So that's another reason I know that there's somebody looking out for me somewhere. So why not be what you can be, push it forward, and see if you can change and impact the world. And that's what I focus my life on. My wife can tell you that. Anyone who knows me, they know that. So it's very important to me. My basic training was at Fort Benning, Georgia. Plus my AIT, my advanced infantry training, was at Fort Benning, Georgia. I went to jump school right after that. I went to Ranger School after that. When I graduated Ranger School, or got through all the phases of Ranger School, my first duty station was Fort Bragg, North Carolina, 82nd Airborne Division, 3rd Battalion, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment.
And so what was your job after training?
After training, I was a paratrooper. I used to jump out of airplanes. And anyone who's airborne, they call us the 82nd Airborne. We used to wear red berets. That was quite the experience, because somebody asked me one time, why would you jump out of a perfectly good airplane, Why in the hell would you do that? But it was fun to me, it was exhilarating. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but the more I did it, the more I wanted. It's almost like I was challenging myself and pushing myself to be something other. My body paid for it, but I had a really good time. I got to travel the world. I got to meet some good men. Some I keep in touch with, some I can't, My first combat experience was in 1989. And it involved Mr. Manuel Noriega. It was Operation Just Cause. I was with the 82nd Airborne Division. So we jumped in. A lot of bullets flying, a lot of bodies flying. The goal was to remove Mr. Noriega from government. Yeah, my first experience was in Panama in 1989. I actually got shot in Panama. I was injured. That's where my first Purple Heart came from. So that was quite the experience of a man being raised here in Dothan. You know, there were no bullets flying. You know, you don't get to see bullets flying in the city every day. So when you take yourself and put a guy in that position, you know, you're gung ho, you're doing your thing, but you pay for it later. And that's what I would talk to veterans about all the time. And that's my mission right now, is to push veterans who are not taking advantage of the benefits, their health benefits, to take advantage of them, because you can be in that situation and you're serving it and you're serving and you're serving, but when it's time to, you know, like Forrest Gump, well, you can't play pinball here anymore, you know, can't play for the Army anymore, but you can play at home. It's time to get back out there in the world, and you have to be able to transition back into the world. I mean, you're in the real world, but this is the real world when you come back here, because the responsibility is on you to have housing for your family, have jobs, take care of yourself, at the same time try to be great, you know. So that's what it's all about. E4, E5, E6, all up to command sergeant major. You start off as a private 2, PFC. I think that when I made sergeant, which was E5, that was a huge thing to me, because the work actually I was promoted faster in the last, like at that time, it was like the last 20 years from E3 to E5, probably because of my battlefield accomplishments or my leadership abilities. People seeing, hey, this guy's a rising star. Let's get him up the rank so he can train these other soldiers to be just as good as he is, you know, if not better. And that's what I did. I've always been about training and pushing and helping people, so that's important to me. The point is, move up rank and you master your job. I mastered my job within 2 years, and that allowed me to move up the ranks faster. You know, I just had a natural knack for it. Growing up here in Dothan made me who I am. It made me tough. It made me resilient. It made me resourceful, because there were a lot of times I didn't have food on the table over there at my house, you know. And my wife can vouch for that. She comes from a big family too, and if you didn't get to the table at football practice, there was a piece of chicken there, but it was already bit off, you know, that kind of thing. But life is what we make it. My military experiences and the ranks I've achieved, I've achieved the rank of sergeant first class, which is a pretty big thing. I mean, it is, because at that point, you know, Department of Defense is looking at you like, hey, you could come work at the Pentagon one day, or you could, you know, based on your profile. If I wanted a Pentagon job, I could have got those things, but I decided to part ways, you know, with that type of thinking, so to speak, you know.
Any advice you would have for those who don't know how to get the right help that they need just when coming out of serving?
Well, it depends on where you live. There's always the crisis hotline, the 1-800 crisis hotline. A lot of people don't like to pick up the phone and say, oh, I'm in trouble, they don't like that. Matter of fact, there's a stigma attached to it, and they don't want that attention. They will sneak in the back door and go talk to the doctor, you know, and you know, when they get to put the shades on, they sneak on out, because people at home are probably, you're crazy, you go to see the shrink and you're crazy. No, we need to, as a country, we need to have a campaign where we take that stigma and take it off and snap it and throw it away and say, look, if you got problems, come see us. There is no reason that you shouldn't have to come see us, especially if you're trying to make this society better than what it is, because the way things are going right now, we need some changes. We really need some changes, and I don't think there's enough resources put on soldiers, you know. We all have access to it, don't get me wrong, but either they live in rural areas where they have to drive 180 miles to get it, you know, or there's no one pushing them to go get it, you know.
And so how can the families help who don't know how to navigate around the situation?
Well, we get this thing called the internet. It's been around for about 20 years now. There's a lot of resource, and all you gotta do is have a phone. You have a phone, right? I have a phone. Everyone has a phone, and you have the resources. You have the access there. You know, you just dial the numbers. You know, go get yourself in the support groups. You know, that's where it all starts, because you got people the same as you talking about the same things. You know, especially if you got 6 combat veterans who are missing limbs or just been through all hell, and they get to sit down and work it out and talk and get it all out, because it bottles up inside. You have to get it out, and talking is the best thing. So, in closing, I would just say to young people, no matter what your economic situation is, no matter where you live, no matter what you have going on in your life, whether your parents are drunk, whatever it is going on in your life, always know that you can transcend that. You can. And all you have to do is want to. You can make excuses you want. You can blame everyone but yourself. But in the end, it's you that's going to mature one day and realize I did myself a disservice. I knew I had the potential to do it and I didn't do it. So I have nothing to pass on to my grandchildren or my children because I didn't take the time to realize that, hey, all you gotta do is reach out to someone. Reach out and help someone just one time. That's all you have to do. It changes lives. It's like the ripple. One drop, and there's 100 ripples. And it's that simple. And if you apply that in your everyday life, you'll find yourself helping people more. My grandfather would take me to the hospitals when I was young just to give out flowers and roses to the people taught me. I didn't ever realize it's just granddad liked to be around me. I thought, but and he was showing me that you give back, and it's what you do when no one's looking that counts. If you're doing things for attention, if you need a pat on the back, you're not doing it for the right reasons. You really aren't. So, to all young people, just weather the storm because there's a storm coming. You're in it right now, actually. Stay positive. Reach out to your family. Whether you're black, white, green, orange, doesn't matter what race you're from. Learn to be tolerant of others. Learn to be tolerant of others' religion, their cultures, and get to know each other because we're in this together, believe it or not. And we only have one planet. This is our planet here. If we don't take care of it, we have nothing to pass on. It's all about, in the end, passing on and keeping the generations going, so we can become a better planet one day or better people one day because we have problems right now all over the country. So we can fix them. We can fix them. I guarantee you we can.